Well, according to the UN, access to the internet is now so fundamental to the way we live our lives that it should be regarded as a basic human right. Try telling that to the people who live in remote parts of Britain, increasingly frustrated as the rest of us enjoy faster and faster connections. In fact, it's the latest speed tests. Ofcom has just found that the gap between average download speeds in urban and rural areas has widened in the last year. True, the government is spending millions of pounds of taxpayers' money to improve broadband access in harder to reach parts. But is it the right technology? And are we getting the best value for money? Susan Watts reports.
Today, it's not just being connected, but being connected fast that decides if families stay in touch, businesses succeed or fail, nations grow or stagnate. But not everyone these days lives and works where it's easy to get online. Sometimes we all find ourselves somewhere a bit off the beaten track. The trouble is that getting internet access in remote rural places like this is not easy. And the government says it wants the vast majority of the UK to get super fast broadband within a few years. But when it comes to remote rural areas like this, commercial needs can often clash with public needs. It's not easy to make money from bringing the internet to a place like this. And the government says it's trying to sort that out, but it's facing criticism. It's not doing a good enough job. Both Labour and the Coalition have recognised that connecting some parts of the UK is commercially unattractive, so just over £1 billion worth of public money is available to help. It's how that money is being spent and how fast that's causing concern. Peter Cochrane used to work for British Telecom, where his job was to predict how technology might change our lives. He now lives in rural Suffolk and is mightily frustrated by the slow broadband. He couldn't even persuade his old employer to help.
This village is surrounded by optical fibre that is owned by the railway, it's owned by British Telecom, it's owned by other carriers. I can't get any of them to let me have access. I can't get any of them to put a fibre into the village. I've even offered to dig the trench of 300 metres into the village myself with the help of the local farmers. Nobody wants to play.
He and his neighbours have put in their own fast broadband system instead, with the help of a small entrepreneurial provider that uses a Wi-Fi system made possible through collaboration with the local church.
In that direction, just beyond those trees, is an old RAF airbase, and at the side there is a building with optical fibre and an antenna. They actually send a signal over to that antenna over there. The signal is then bounced over to this tower, and just below where you and I are standing right now is the belfry. And behind the belfry shutters, we've got a series of antennas like this, and they just illuminate the village so that everybody can get access to 32 megabits both ways.
Ufford Village in Suffolk includes designers and consultants working from home, small businesses providing employment, and these days the more traditional rural business of farming is one of the most IT intensive. James Foskett's 1,800-acre mixed farm needs internet access so he can keep track of supplies and in touch with supermarket customers. He's not on the Ufford Village Church Wi-Fi broadband yet, but plans to switch.
This morning, went in the office at 5:30 and there was no internet. So we felt as if we've lost a leg today. We're harvesting potatoes within half an hour of our load going into the factory. When they've done the quality control, we instantly get a readout. If we've got a problem, we can go to the field and change it immediately without having hundreds of tons on wheels, which might all get rejected.
BT told us that Ufford is now on the rollout for rural broadband as one of the hard-to-reach areas, so should get fibre before 2015, possibly sooner. Nationally, the picture's less positive. Last month, the National Audit Office found that only 9 of 44 rural broadband projects are going to reach their target that 90% of premises get super fast coverage by May 2015. Then in June this year, the government shifted the overall target. Now 95% of all UK premises are to be covered, but not until 2017, 2 years later than scheduled. But it's not just how long it's taking to get broadband in place that's a problem, but what some see as a lack of overall ambition from the government.
The definition of super fast by a global perspective is super slow. So they're comparing to Europe. I would argue that we're not in a battle for survival against Europe, we're in a battle of survival against the rest of the planet. If I go to Hong Kong, I get a gigabit both ways to my hotel room. So that's 1,000 megabits, that's super fast. I come into the UK and people talk about 20 or 80 megabits being super fast. And an awful lot of the time, you get those magic words, up to.
BT is pushing ahead with upgrading the backbone of its entire network with fibre, on top of its existing copper connections, including in rural areas such as here in Acle, near the Norfolk Broads. Which is where we met the man in charge of broadband rollout at BT, Bill Murphy. We asked him if his upgrade plan is ambitious enough. Are you going to go back?
Well, I think we are aiming quite high. You know, speeds have increased threefold in the last 3 years, and we're second behind Japan in the G8 right now. Part of the reason what we're putting out is because we believe the technology is good for today and will be upgradable in the future, right? We're delivering upload speeds now 20 times faster than the old generation of technology. And for the vast majority of consumers and the vast majority of small businesses, it's going to fit the bill.
But there could be another problem. The way we use computers is changing. More and more, we're not storing data and software on our own computers, but on powerful remote servers in the cloud. That means we need to send and receive, upload and download huge amounts of information. And to do that, we need broadband connections that are fast in both directions. The trouble is, that's not necessarily the system that's being rolled out.
I don't think our politicians, I don't think our leaders actually understand what broadband means because they don't actually use it. They think about downloading music and watching movies. That's not the game. The future is about collaboration. It's the collaboration of machines and people with machines. And to do that, you need lots of bandwidth in both directions. So straight away, we need bidirectional broadband. We've invested fundamentally in the wrong technology.
We asked Ed Vaizey, the minister responsible for broadband, if that's right.
Well, I'm not going to try and have an argument with the former chief technology officer of BT, but actually it's a bit like economists. You could talk to any number of technologists and they will tell you actually there's a different way of doing it. I don't think it should be the government's vision what the technology is. So we put money on the table, said we wanted to achieve superfast broadband. We invited bids and we said emphatically that we would be technology neutral.
Malcolm Corbett represents some of BT's rivals. He works from home in not-so-rural Woolwich in South London, where one company is laying 1 gigabit fibre to these riverside flats. It's the kind of entrepreneurial approach he says could be happening more in the countryside. But some of the small companies he represents say they work hard to drum up custom in out-of-the-way rural areas, only to find BT is using public money to cover the same territory.
There's only a limited amount of taxpayers' money available, so if you've got people who are willing to invest private sector funding or community funding in those communities, why not spend the state funding elsewhere? Why spend it in the same place? It makes no sense.
He says the way contracts for the National Rural Programme were set up from the outset meant many of BT's rivals felt they couldn't compete. He's also concerned that county councils, who are spending the public money, don't always have all the information they need up front to make sure they're getting value for money.
They've got a composition of one, which is not really any composition at all. And in many cases they're feeling that they're not necessarily getting the best value for money, but there's not a great deal they can do about it.
The National Audit Office also drew attention to BT's dominance. Of 44 broadband projects in England, BT had won 26 by June this year and has since won another 5. The NAO said the government's programme is not only late, but lacks competition to protect public value. In response, BT said strong competition at the start had ensured counties benefited from the best possible terms. Other companies dropped out as deploying fibre is expensive, BT said, whilst it has invested significant sums in rural Britain. BT says it's not about unnecessary duplication, but about providing the most reliable services.
Networks aren't for Christmas. You know, great enthusiasm, passion, I love it. But at the end of the day, anything can be built, but can it be run? Can it be continually invested in? Can it offer choice of supply?
At the Bond family farm in the village of Blowfield, Norfolk, they grow herbs and other fresh produce, including mint for Coleman's in Norwich. If they miss an email, they can lose orders. Frustrated by the low speed of the old BT system, they also turned to a small Wi-Fi broadband setup built around the local church.
We were struggling to even get to 0.5 megabits per second, which is just completely useless. We went to another company called Wi-Spire, who do us a wireless connection, and we are now getting a usable and effective, all right, not super fast, but it is usable broadband now. People in the Westminster bubble, as it's called, don't appreciate what it's like to live in more rural areas, don't appreciate, you know, the lack of broadband, lack of transport, and everything else that we struggle with out here.
Of course, people in rural areas are utterly frustrated. The rise of broadband in the last 10 years has been phenomenal in terms of the people's need, which is why we put this programme in place. But you can't wave a magic wand and deliver it overnight. It does take time, but we do now have a clear schedule. We have most of our contracts signed and we are getting underway.
In the end, it's public money that's being spent to wire up rural communities. So the government will want to be certain this is used to provide as many people as possible with the best system, as it strives to keep people in remote places in touch and to ensure that anyone who might generate wealth for the nation can do so regardless of where they live.
Super fast, Susan Watt.